Most people think their leopard gecko goes to sleep when the lights go out. The tank gets dark, the room gets quiet, and for a while it looks like nothing is happening at all. But that is where most people are wrong, because the moment the last light disappears, the entire world changes for a leopard gecko. The animal that looked still, sleepy, and almost decorative during the day suddenly becomes something else entirely. It starts reading heat, scent, vibration, shadow, and timing with a precision most people never notice. It leaves the hiding place you thought it lived in all day, and in the dark, it begins a completely different life. Welcome back to the Reptile Lab. If you are new here, subscribe now, because what you are about to learn will change the way you look at your leopard gecko forever. Today, we are going through 8 things that happen to a leopard gecko at night. Things that are happening right now in your room, whether you know it or not. And we are ending with the one thing most owners never realize until they have kept one long enough to see it for themselves. Stay with me all the way through, because number 8 is the one that changes everything. When the lights go off, a leopard gecko does not simply go to bed. It shifts into its natural activity window. Leopard geckos are crepuscular to nocturnal, which means they are most active in the evening and night, especially in the hours after sunset. In the wild, that timing helps them avoid extreme daytime heat and reduces exposure to predators, while they hunt insects and move between shelters. What looks like a calm pet in the afternoon is really an animal waiting for the right conditions. At night, the enclosure becomes more than a tank. It becomes a landscape made of temperature, scent trails, hides, and open space. A leopard gecko does not experience darkness the way we do. For it, the dark is not emptiness. It is permission. That is why so many keepers notice their gecko becoming more active the moment a house quiets down. It may leave its hide, circle the warm side of the enclosure, inspect food areas, or stand still and listen before moving again. That behavior is not random. It is a survival rhythm that has been running for a long time. A leopard gecko is not just moving through darkness. It is moving through a thermal environment. Because reptiles are ectothermic, their body temperature depends heavily on the environment around them. That means a leopard gecko uses warm and cool zones in its enclosure the way a person might use roads and landmarks. Heat is information. At night, the animal often makes deliberate choices about where it rests, how long it stays in a hide, and when it moves across the enclosure. If the warm hide is holding heat well, it may stay there longer. If the floor cools down too much, the gecko may shift position or seek another microclimate. This is one reason proper thermal gradients matter so much. The gecko is not just being comfortable. It is trying to regulate digestion, activity, and energy use. In the wild, nocturnal and crepuscular lizards still use behavioral thermoregulation after dark, and studies have shown that even night-active species actively select temperatures that support growth and function. That means your leopard gecko is not asleep to temperature when the lights go out. It is still negotiating with heat all night long. One of the strangest things about leopard geckos is that they can seem motionless for long stretches, even when they are awake. People assume that means nothing is happening. But reptiles often conserve energy by moving less and acting with purpose. Every step costs something. Every unnecessary movement matters. So at night, your gecko may only travel a short distance, but that distance can still matter a lot. It may check a water dish, inspect a corner, reposition under a hide, or sit in a place where it can monitor the enclosure without being exposed. That stillness is not emptiness. It is a strategy. In the wild, the animals that survive are often the ones that move only when movement gives them an advantage. This is also why people often underestimate how much a gecko does overnight. By morning, the enclosure may look almost unchanged, but the animal has probably sampled its surroundings multiple times, adjusted its resting spot, and checked for prey cues. A leopard gecko can be quiet and highly active at the same time. That combination is easy to miss if you judge activity only by what your eyes can catch in a few seconds. People often imagine reptiles as creatures that only see what is directly in front of them, but leopard geckos rely on a mix of sensory information, including vision, smell, vibration, and tactile cues. Their eyes are adapted for low light, which helps them function after dark, but that is only part of the story. They also use their tongue and vomer nasal system to gather chemical information from the environment. That means when your gecko flicks its tongue at night, it is not sniffing in a casual sense. It is sampling its world. It is checking for prey scent, familiar scents, and environmental changes. The enclosure itself becomes a data field. What changed since last night? Is food here? Is this hiding place safe? Is the ground warm enough? Has something moved? This is why lighting changes, handling, and even room traffic can matter more than people expect. A gecko is not just reacting to obvious visual events. It is constantly building a map out of chemical and sensory signals. In darkness, that map becomes even more important. The gecko is not blind at night. It is specialized. A leopard gecko's night behavior often begins long before feeding time. If your animal is healthy and well-conditioned, it may start showing anticipatory movement when it associates specific evening cues with food. That might be the sound of the enclosure opening, the movement of the tongs, or even the keeper's routine around feeding time. Reptiles can learn patterns, and repeated routines matter. This is where a lot of people are surprised. They think feeding response is only about the insect itself, but it often starts with the environment. A gecko can learn that certain times, sounds, and movements predict prey. Once that pattern is established, the animal may emerge earlier, wait in a preferred location, or begin tracking the keeper more closely when feeding day arrives. In the wild, nocturnal hunters have to be ready the moment an opportunity appears. In captivity, that same instinct can become tightly linked to the keeper's schedule. So when your leopard gecko stares out from its hide at night, it may not be watching nothing. It may be waiting for a pattern it has learned to trust. Night is not only when a leopard gecko becomes active. It is also when it becomes more cautious in subtle ways. Wild reptiles are constantly balancing hunger against safety, and that balance does not disappear in captivity. Even a gecko that looks calm may still freeze when it hears a sudden sound, then decide whether to stay hidden or move. That behavior is not fear in the human sense. It is a threat assessment system. The animal is asking, in its own way, whether the moment is safe enough to keep moving. A well-handled, captive, bred leopard gecko may become much more tolerant of human presence over time, but it does not stop being a prey animal. It simply learns when the world is likely to be dangerous, and when it is likely to be fine. That is why some owners see their gecko act bold at night in the enclosure, but skittish when suddenly lifted. The confidence is situational. The animal may feel secure in its own territory, but still treat the outside world with caution. That difference matters. A gecko is not a tiny lizard version of a dog. It is a survival specialist making constant risk calculations in the dark. One of the most interesting things about leopard geckos is that they learn their keeper's patterns. They may come to recognize certain times of day, certain sounds, or certain handling habits as part of the normal rhythm of life. Over time, that can create the impression that the animal knows you. In a sense, it does. But what it really knows first is your predictability. That is why a gecko can seem to wake up when you enter the room at night. It is not necessarily waiting because it loves attention in the mammal-like way. It is waiting because your behavior has become part of the enclosure's logic. You are tied to food, lighting, movement, and safety. In the reptile brain, those associations matter. This is one of the most emotional parts of keeping a leopard gecko for a long time. Owners often start noticing that the animal becomes calmer with repeated routines and more responsive to familiar handling. The gecko is not becoming human. It is becoming familiar with the world you provide. And in reptile terms, familiarity can mean survival. I saved this one for last, because it is the hardest thing to say clearly. When your leopard gecko comes out at night, it is not just being active. It is participating in a life shaped around your care. The temperatures you provide, the hides you choose, the feeding schedule you maintain, the room you keep quiet after dark, all of it becomes the framework in which the animal lives. That gecko did not ask for human housing. It did not choose a glass box. But over time, it learns the rules of that box, and in doing so, it adapts to a world that only exists because you keep it stable. That is why so many leopard gecko owners feel a strange connection to them. These animals are not loud. They do not demand affection the way a dog does. They do not climb into your lap because they missed you at work. But they do something quieter and, in some ways, more ancient. They learn that your presence means something. They learn that your routine predicts safety, warmth, and food. And then, night after night, they emerge into that trust. And once you have seen it, it is hard to unsee. The little head appearing from the hide after dark, the careful tongue flick, the slow, deliberate step across the substrate. The way the gecko pauses as if listening to the room itself. That is not emptiness. That is a living animal reading the world you built for it. You did not just get a pet that sits quietly in a tank. You took responsibility for an animal that still runs on ancient instincts, even in a modern home. And the most surprising part is that the gecko never really stopped being wild. It just learned how to be wild inside your care. Most people think the night is when nothing happens. But for a leopard gecko, night is when most of the important things happen. It is when the animal hunts, thermoregulates, assesses safety, samples scent, and rebuilds its mental map of the enclosure. It is also when the creature most clearly reveals that it is not just surviving, but adapting. That is what makes leopard geckos so compelling. It looks simple until you really watch them. Then you realize they are not simple at all. They are doing exactly what evolution designed them to do. Conserving energy, reading danger, finding heat, and using the dark to move through the world on their own terms. So the next time you turn the lights off and think your leopard gecko has gone still, remember this. The night does not belong to silence. It belongs to the animal you thought was asleep. Before I go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever caught your leopard gecko doing something unexpected at night? Watching you, moving around more than usual, or coming out when you thought it would stay hidden? Tell me what happened in the comments. Because the night behavior of these animals is usually more revealing than people realize.